I go.
Amen.
I go.
Amen.
I go is the call of the person trying to get your attention, whether that be the teacher, professor, elder. I may is your immediate response. It means you have my attention. So when I say I go, you say
Amen.
And I love it. It has a cadence. It has a rhythm, right? So if I say I go, you say
Amen.
And if I say I go, you say
Amen.
welcome, welcome. So the food is currently in another building, so we are working on getting it here. So we will take a break once we get started to let folks get food, or we may wait to the end, but we have Boney's barbecue happening. We do have options for our vegan and vegetarian friends. So yes, let's go ahead and get started. So on behalf of the University of Denver, on behalf of the University of Denver, Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and Black Community Initiatives, I welcome you to the Towards Black Freedom panel. Wait, can y'all hear me? Clear? Yes. I feel like I can project. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So today will be pretty straightforward in how we engage. We'll do some acknowledgments. We'll sing "Lift Up Your Voice" collectively, all 3 verses, and then we'll get to the panel. And for the panel, we'll save the last about 20 minutes for audience engagement, Q&A, comments, concerns, and whatever that looks like. So before I begin, I would like to ask for permission. So, in my tradition. So, I would like to say, has anybody been at DU for more than 15 years? I'm going to ask you all. It is important to ask permission because you all are trusting me to carry this program on. So do I have permission to continue this program? Okay. So Denver is home to many different citizens of indigenous nations, and we recognize that their enduring presence on this land by paying respects to their elders, both past and present. Please take a moment to consider the legacies of violence, displacement, migration, resettlement that bring us together today. Please join us in uncovering such truths at all public events. Now is the time to reflect and personally reconcile how the genocidal acts against indigenous communities intersect with our learning, collaboration, and sharing of knowledge. I also want to name the tribes as we are recognizing. I want to name the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, and the Ute tribe. So I am going to introduce a personal labor acknowledgement. This is something coming from Jen. I am also here to acknowledge the labor of my ancestors. We must remember and understand that this country and our institutions are built on the many unpaid, uncredited, and disrespected backs of folks that were subjected to enslavement. Let us remember their contributions, their lives, and their humanity. We thank you for the things that we will never know, the cries that we will never hear, and the courage it took to survive. We acknowledge the blood that was shed, the families broken, and the hopes and dreams of the slave. We acknowledge those who made something out of nothing, and that we are all closer to them than we can ever really imagine. We honor Black lives taken too soon, Black brilliance locked up behind bars, Black bodies bound up in systems, Black mental health terrorized by racism, Black trans lives cut short by ignorance. We denounce anti-Blackness in all of its forms and seek to become intimately familiar with a taste of liberation for all. And with that, the importance of our breath is a reminder of our existence and humanity. So please, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes and take a breath with me. In, out. One more time, and now we're gonna try to take a breath with gratitude. In, out. Thank you. And thank you for vibing with us as we are changing things on the fly and getting things as we're going. So we are going to sing "Let Every Voice" together. Let's not worry. All of the lyrics will be on the screen. There will also be a background check. So for the folks who like to move in, yes. So if we can all stand if you're able. Thank you, thank you. So I am excited to have this conversation. I think it's a conversation that I've had with most of these panelists in some way, shape, or form since I've been here. So I'm excited to get to it. So I love to let the panelists introduce themselves. So we're gonna start with the Kirsten Hubbard, our latest graduate of the University of Denver. And our outgoing BCI graduate intern. I'm sad, but I also have to say that. Okay, now Kirsten, let's say about 90 seconds.
Okay, can you guys all hear me? Okay, so, you know.
Use the mic.
Oh, use the mic, okay. Did I? Okay, sorry. So my name's Kirsten Hubbard. I just recently graduated from the forensic psychology program with my master's at GSPP. As John said, I am formerly the BCI graduate student coordinator for IEE. And I'm from Romulus, Michigan. Is there anything else that you want? Happy to be here, really appreciative of the opportunity and everything BCI has given me.
one more thing. So this is the DEI space. So we are going to introduce our ways of giving honor to each other. So I'm going to model it, and then you reflect back at me. You have to wait to the end. I know it's gonna feel like it's up to the earth. Okay. And that is a positive energy, right? Like you want people to feel that And if you really do it, if you really commit to it, just feel what it feels like in the room. Cool? Let's do it together.
Me? Okay. Hello, check. My mic sounds nice. Check one. Right on, I see back there. Hello, my name is Anthea Johnson Rowan. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I proudly serve as, I only have one job now, y'all. Right? I know. Let's get some faster that. So I'm the director for the Equity in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics program. I have been at the university for 12 years. I started off with Center for Multicultural Excellence and then migrated to Campus Life and Inclusive Excellence, and which then became Student Affairs and Inclusive Excellence. And July 1st, I'll be moving over to Student Affairs. So I think the other part that I want to share is that I've been really fortunate enough to, I think what DU offers is the opportunity to try new things. And so I appreciate that I've been able to carry on the tradition of Black Male Initiative Summit, co-develop the Black Women Lead, and also co-develop the Sister Network. And I feel like this environment has allowed me to support the students that I work with, and I'm able to follow my passions and my talents by creating long-running programs that support diverse students and their needs, and students who would like, and for the students who participate in these programs, I hope that they thrive.
I get to be the first. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Tamara White. I go by Dr. White with students, and I serve as the Associate Dean of Students for Student Affairs and Inclusive Excellence. And I think what I will share is my professional career. So I grew up in Colorado. I went to DU for my undergrad. I went to Western Illinois University. I got my master's in college student personnel. I know, right? Whoop, whoop. And then I had kids. I have 2 kids. My son is now a sophomore in college, and my daughter is a senior, and she'll be coming here to DU next year. Another whoop whoop. And then I got my PhD here at DU. I was part of Sister Network. Very grateful for the Sister Network when I was here. Let's see, in my career, I've worked at the Colorado Department of Higher Education. I worked for the governor's office for a little bit. And I spent the last 15 years at the community college system. Very happy to be here, able to use my undergrad, my doctoral experience in how I serve and work with students. And it really feels like coming full circle. So hopefully I'll be able to talk more about that later.
And Dr. Stewart. Oh.
Good afternoon, right? I had to check, like, look, I put my socks on the wrong feet this morning. So I am Dr. D.L. Stewart. I am a tenured full professor and department chair in higher education over at the College of Education, Morgridge College of Education. This is my 2nd year at DU. DU is the 5th institution I've been a faculty member at. So this is completing year 22 as a university faculty member in this field. Yeah, it's been a long time, but still more to go, right? And you know, I think it's important to say that those 22 years in academic institutions, that career really is owed to the attempted genocide and enslaved labor. All right, attempted genocide of indigenous peoples and enslaved labor, mostly of African Americans, those who became African Americans in this country, because there is no institution in the US that has not been touched by that, okay, in some way, shape, or form. And so for me, as someone who has made my living in these spaces, it's important for me to reckon with that and what that means for how I show up as a scholar, as a teacher, as an advisor, as a member of university communities, and as a member of local communities. And so I think some of that will probably come out during our conversation today as well. My other things that are important to know about me, my research focus then has included the experiences of Black students in historically white institutions. And that's how I like to frame it, as it's historically white institutions, not predominantly white institutions, because I think the history of whiteness in these spaces is really important to emphasize. It's not just that there are more white people here, it's that the ways that that has constructed the environment, right, in certain ways is important to acknowledge. I also show up here as a Black, queer, trans, disabled, and Jewish person. And so I think it's important to also recognize the intersectionality of not just those identities, but what it means as I encounter systemic oppression and intersections of systemic oppression in university environments across all of those identities and identity sectors. And I'm the parent of a young adult who graduated from a historically white institution, The Ohio State University, which is where my graduate degrees are also from. And so the extension of that privilege, that generational privilege in terms of education, also matters. But graduated from that institution as a Black, queer, neurodivergent young person as well. He's 24 years old now, still living in Columbus, Ohio, bless his heart. And trying to make a way, right? And so that is also relevant and important to how I show up in this space amongst these wonderful people that I am blessed to be in company with today.
Can you share how Black female
I guess that's me. Um, for me, being like a 25-year-old Black woman, like, you know, experiencing what Michigan was like compared to coming to Denver, it's been really different for me. Coming into my own identity, having those conversations with my mother, having those conversations with other family members, and especially now entering into the academic space. For me, Black freedom and liberation is being able to bring all of me and not separating me into my coursework, into my career, into my life, just whatever it is. And I frequently would explain to my cohort that for me, I don't have that privilege of just being Black, or I don't have that privilege of just being a woman. Like, I am a Black woman in this field, going into forensic psychology, you know, starting my career out, and I need all of me to be encompassed in that. Wherever I walk, wherever I am, the first thing that you see about me is me being a Black woman walking into this space. On paper, you may see Kirsten Hubbard, but soon as you meet me, I'm not just Kirsten Hubbard right then and there. And I need that to be recognized. I need that to be appreciated. And more importantly, I need that to be respected.
And because we can, yep. Okay, and because we're in the BCI space, we can also, if you hear something, you can snap, you can ancestral grunt. Anybody know what an ancestral grunt is? Right, we get to get some feedback. All right.
I appreciate this topic. When you sent the questions, it made me think, like so big. Like, what does Black freedom and liberation mean? But for me, what it made me think about is being able to lead without it being, wow, she's a good leader as a Black woman, or having to question when someone does, question me. Is that about my race? Is that about my gender? Like, or is it just about my leadership? Like, I don't have the luxury of just walking into spaces without thinking about that piece. So for me, Black freedom and liberation is the freedom from having to wonder, is it racism? Is that the reason that this is happening? And then I also was thinking about, like, in terms of being able to do things, it would be the freedom, which I think is education and money, but the freedom to live my life as I wanted, as I want, without, again, having to worry about the impact of racism. So, big picture.
Anybody else?
All right. I also really appreciated this question. For me, as I think about what Black freedom and liberation look like, I think about joy that is not restricted to special occasions and celebratory moments. I think about non-reliance on institutional systems for space and breath. I think about being able to breathe, and how that in the multiple ways that looks like, right? Because I posted a couple of days ago as I thought about the attacks and the retrenchment on DEI efforts across institutions in this country. Yes, mostly led by Republican political legislators and governors, but also even those who are not that, even in spaces where that's not happening. Arkansas, the University of Arkansas, for instance, just dismantled their DEI offices, redistributed those staff, and there is no legislative pressure. There was no Board of Trustees pressure. And I'll call it out, that chancellor is African-American. Okay. But in that post the other day, it was like, when I was in undergrad at Kalamazoo College, so I know Romulus. Okay. That's right, as I should. I could not have finished that degree without the presence of our Office of Multicultural Affairs and the director of that office. It was a one-person office because this was, the early 90s, and most of those offices were one-people offices. For those who have been around for a minute, remember those, that period. And it wasn't because I wasn't a good student. I graduated magna cum laude for Kalamazoo College, which is a highly respected institution. It wasn't because my grades. It wasn't because I was struggling academically. It was because of the racially hostile environment in that space. And that Office of Multicultural Affairs enabled me to literally breathe some days on that campus. It also looks like, as I think about the invitation that John has brought us to really do call and response in this space. I think about Black freedom and liberation also looking like being able to do call and response outside of these spaces, right? And have that honored, respected, and people not looking like what is happening, people not getting scared, who are not members of the community. It means having the freedom to be able to engage each other like that wherever we find each other, not just in spaces, again, that are restricted to and centered on us as Black folk. And the last thing I'll say, it's about, and touch on what Kirsten raised, it's about recognizing the full heterogeneity of Blackness, and that is embraced and celebrated by Black folk, okay? Because often that does not happen. And so when we talk about freedom and liberation, it has to start from within and bubble out. It is not something that we wait to be given, and it's something that we claim, and it's something that we cultivate within our own communities. How are we fighting with and for each other? Recognizing that full spectrum of Blackness as it exists in these spaces.
I'll just say a few words on this. One, when I think of Black freedom and liberation, it makes me think that I would love to have, I mean, I had an amazing upraising. My parents are incredible. Both identify as Black, but I grew up with rules to be a Black person. So, you know, those rules were to keep me safe. Those rules were about how you respect white counterparts, your teachers, your police officers, everybody. And that was to keep you safe because you didn't know if you were disrespectful in the eyes of whoever, you might not come home. And that's how my parents grew up, especially my dad from Mount Bayou, Mississippi. And so when I think about that, I would love for our world to be one where we don't have to still, because I may look young, but I'm older, that our younger folks are growing up and they don't have to have those same rules. And I think that that's what that made me think about is, you know, and also I remember growing up with rules about even how you present yourself going out. Like I remember going up once to visit my dad at the Air Force Academy. He was a captain, and my mom was taking me to a doctor's appointment. He didn't even make eye contact with me. He was like, Portia, why does this child have holes in her shoes? And I was like, Daddy, but, and he was like, go take her to get, I mean, it was even something like that. That is, and they were my favorite shoes. I didn't think about it, but for my dad, that was a presentation on him as a Black man and me as a Black girl, that I needed to be looking my best and presenting my best all of the time. And sometimes even with that, I wasn't even seen as half as good. So that freedom, I would love to have. I wish that for others that are coming up behind me. I feel like Black freedom and liberation also is the recognition, as Jonathan mentioned, of the enslaved accomplishments to the American wealth system. None of us would be where we are if it were not for the free labor that Black people gave as enslaved, and also when they were arrested for loitering because they were not allowed to do the same opportunities, then they were released out to railroads to work for basically free. So that's something that I think about often that should be recognized, because, you know, we had a speaker come in to the Equity and STEM program, and we were talking about the foundations of the University of Denver, and some of my students were like, wow, if I had known that, I wouldn't have come. And the speaker was like, well, just so you know, every university has those same foundations. And the students are like, what? And so we started talking about that. And I think if people understood and knew that, I think there would be a different kind of respect for the grounds that we walk on and the accomplishments of others. I think there wouldn't be as much insensitivity. The speaker mentioned that at Clemson University, they actually used stones from the enslaved quarters as the bedrock for the administration building that has recently been built. So, you know, when I think of that freedom and liberation, I also think that it shouldn't be just my responsibility as a Black woman. I think it should be everybody's responsibility to be looking at pictures, how we do business, and having everybody think, oh, wait a minute, is that something we need to think about? Is that something that is preferencing other folks over other students? So those are all the things that, I mean, I have a million more. I wrote a ton down. That's why I was like, I'm gonna let them speak first and then I'll decide what I'll say.
Yeah, we'll get to it. I wanna echo those rules, and those rules for survival, and how internalized depression also impacts folks who are Black, and that our journey for liberation also needs to work on our insides. So like I'm breaking about 7 of those rules right now in just existing. And every time I talk to my mom and she sees the way I show up at work, and she sees the way she really worries for my job security. She worries for my safety in a lot of times. And that's something that I have to carry throughout campus every day. And that's something that we all have to think about, how we're presenting, what that looks like, what we're willing to sacrifice. How we're judged. Absolutely. How you show up at the airport. And I love to be comfortable. Like I love to, and you got to be on. Okay. So in the context of Juneteenth ending, what actions and strategies can historically white universities, and I'll even extend it to say, what can we do, right? What can we do on this campus? What actions and strategies can we do to ensure that the dialogue and engagement surrounding Black freedom continues beyond this event and integrating into the very fabric of the institution? And I will start this question off with Dr. Stewart.
Do you need a minute?
You need some time? You need some time?
I can do it. I can start if you want.
Okay.
Okay, that's okay. I'm reading your body language. I saw you writing. I'm like, I can start. So when I think about this and I think about Juneteenth, I think we need to educate the faculty, staff, and students about why the university has decided to recognize Juneteenth. I think every single staff member needs to, and faculty member and student needs to understand why we have it off. And because my husband was talking at work and they were like, Juneteenth, why does your wife have that off? And I was like, you better have come up with the right answer because I told you. He did. He was like, I did educate them. I did tell them. But I think that's number one. That's important is, you know, we have these holidays that we have off from the university. And, you know, if you think about Martin Luther King Day, I was always under the impression that we were supposed to use that as a day of action or reflection. And so similarly, when we think about Juneteenth, what are we reflecting on, you know, and it doesn't, and it could mean that when you're thinking about Black freedom and liberation, I mean, quite honestly, I was like, I think my ancestors would have been super impressed that I even have a day off. And they would have been like, wow, and it's a Monday? I mean, I really was thinking about that. I really was thinking about how far we've come. And I do really think that with the university's education, I do think we need to be thinking about this because I feel like a lot of people think February is Black History Month. And so, you know, we've checked that off, but you know, then wait, there's another Black thing we're doing. What is that? And so I think we need to make sure that we are educating folks. Why do we have it off? Are there ideas about how to reflect or observe the weekend and why is it important? I think for everybody who has that day off, there should be a responsibility that they tell their families about it too. So their families should understand, why is mommy home? Why is pop home? Oh, what are we going to do that weekend? Oh, that's interesting. But mommy, we're not Black. Why do we have that day off? That should be the conversation. Because otherwise it ends up being like a bonanza day. Nobody understands why. And we're not really trying to change things if we're not educating our whole entire population.
I also want to mention that now there is a strange moment when you're just out in public and like somebody who's not Black says Happy Juneteenth, and I'm like, I don't know how to respond. How do I respond to that? Right? I don't know what the conversation, I don't know what the understanding is. And additionally, for our parents or the folks or our people with young folks, on the BCI website, we have included tons of resources for how to talk about Juneteenth with your family.
All right. But I had that moment, Jonathan. I was at synagogue on Monday, volunteer effort, and someone came up to me and very like with so much genuine, right? And she didn't quite know exactly how to say it because she said Happy June 19th, like just, but it was so, and I was like, wow, thank you. You know, and the surprise of that recognition coming from someone who was not Black, but had learned some things, right? So I think that matters in this, and I think a nice segue, Anthea, from what you were saying in terms of like this, like June 19th. See, she got me doing it. Juneteenth is a specific day, right? Where a specific historical thing happened. And yet, Juneteenth is an everyday occurrence because the notification that yes, you are now free is happening for Black folks every single day, right? Particularly in spaces that are historically white, in spaces that rely on enslaved labor, right, for their very existence. Juneteenth is an everyday occurrence. It is not just something that happened one day historically in 1865 down in Texas, right? And so if we have that kind of a consciousness that there is a need to notify people every day, Black folk every day, you are and can be and can live free, then that means we don't just do programming around that idea in one moment. That means we're doing that year round. And it means we're doing that year round in a way that is, I'm talking about institution, right? In a way that is supported by hard dollars and the expansion of human capacity, right? It's about not, okay, doing this on a shoestring, okay? And one or two people being the ones who do all of that labor and manage to pull, make $1 out of 15 cents. No. If institutions are going to say they value Black lives, and if an institution can dare to say they value Black lives and not call it all lives, I am talking about a particular place, okay? Then this happens in the commitment of resources, fiscal and human, and chronological resource, right? So I think about space, not just as physical space, but cultural space, chronos space, so time, space, as well as fiscal space, space in the budget, space in the what do you call it? Organizational chart, right? Where there is space allotted for Black freedom in really tangible ways that are not done sort of on the side in the margins, okay, but are said boldly.
Yeah. I'm actually going to go to the next question, and I want to do a comment on the space. And as we are crafting those spaces, we have to look at the rules of those spaces and understanding that Black liberation means we have to change these Eurocentric, grounded in white supremacist rules, right? The ways that money flows has to be Black, right? Like we have to really look at that differently. And then I am going to, just based on the question, I'm going to highlight some of the previous events. So even as we're thinking about Juneteenth here at DU, and this year we decided to take a model of what, so what, now what. So we started off of the what with the educational panel, grounding with the city of Juneteenth, the music festival. And then we did the so what, we did the parade. And now this is the now what. What does this mean for us moving forward? So we're really trying to change our focus and how we're talking and engaging with these concepts of Blackness and anti-Blackness. So I am going to move to the next question and start off with Dr. White. So what are some resources that you or other folks have found here at the University of Denver or in the surrounding area that have affirmed your Blackness? I will also go into the other kind of caveats and thinking about what are some resources that we need to know that as we're showing up for Black people in this community of the resources that exist for faculty, staff, students.
That one I can touch on for sure. I was hoping we would get to that because I think that we do have some resources for our Black students here at DU. It's better than it was. It's not as good as it can be. But we have the Cultural Center where we're supporting students of color, as well as our gender and sexuality diverse students. We have First at DU, which is supporting our first generation students. We have social justice education, where we're really working with all members of our community, our students really, to help them to understand diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice. But then I was also thinking about the Dean of Students area and how the Dean of Students area is really looking at the multiple pieces of identities that our students have, and how can we support all of the identities, looking at our learning effectiveness program for our neurodivergent students, disability support programs for our students with disabilities, our veteran students. Like, I think the Dean of Students area is a really good place for students because they can really embrace all aspects of themselves. But as Dr. Stewart was talking, I thought about, as a kid, my dad would tell us all about Juneteenth, and, we had to go down to 5 points, and like, it was always a big deal. So to the world, I want to say thanks for catching up, because I've been doing this for years. But glad that there are more folks who have an understanding of what happened and why this is significant and important. Also thinking about changing topics. My ADD is working out real well right now. Thank you. Thank you. My other topic that I wanted to talk about is staff. And just thinking about when I was a student here at DU, some of you have heard the story. I came from an all-white environment, came here to an all-white environment, and really began to understand racism. And it was different for me here because I didn't go home to Black people, right? I didn't spend the weekend with Black people. I was around white people all the time. I lived with, I went to classes with, I was on clubs, and I was with white people all the time. And so I really began to understand racism. And I remember having a conversation with my parents, and they were like, what is going on with you? Like, this is very different than who you were in high school. And not feeling like I had space to explore, space to understand. There wasn't anyone that I could go to that could say to me, don't worry, that's just pre-encounter. That's just encounter. That's just your immersion, right? There wasn't that. And then when I went to graduate school, I found out about CROSS and Black race identity development. And I was like, that's what happened to me. That's what I was going through. Like, oh, wow, it would have been great to have someone say to me, let's talk about Black race identity development. Let's talk about, what happens in each stage. And so I get to do that now, right? DU has hired staff that can do that with students. We have faculty that can do that with students. So I think we are, like I said, we're making progress. We're not as far as we can be, but we are making progress.
Absolutely. And I also want to note that Dr. Cross is actually a faculty emeritus here at the University of Denver. So that is an amazing person to have one of the fathers to speak of Black student development at the university. So Kirsten, same question.
So for me, I'm just gonna be honest. I had a terrible experience being here a student at DU. As you guys know, GSPP, we went through a lot of changes, a lot of unfortunate changes. And I lost myself in the classroom. And when I'm saying I lost myself in the classroom, I lost representation in the classroom. 75% of the reason why I chose the University of Denver was because of Dr. April Alexander. I remember I was an undergrad, and I've always known that I wanted to do forensic psychology. I just didn't know the name for it when I was younger, but I knew what I wanted to do. And I told my mama, this is what I want to do. We didn't know the name. We figured it out. I saw Dr. April Alexander, and I saw her research, and I was like, I need to know her. Like, I always tell her this all the time. I was like, you're going to be my psychology auntie. Like, you are going to be here for me, and I need to learn from you. I even told her, I was like, I want to be you. And I chose this school because I knew I had that opportunity to learn from her and to soak up everything. Because that was the first time I saw a Black woman in the field. Every single time that I saw forensic psychology, then it was on TV, like seeing like the crime shows and things like that, but I never truly saw myself. And so when I came here and Dr. Alexander left because of everything that occurred in GSPP, because of racism, sexism, being overworked, not being able to complete research as promised, like all these different things, then we didn't even talk about it. We nothing was even said. And actually, I don't know if you know this, but I got an email from Sister Network. And I went there and I was like, okay, this is another opportunity to be around Black women. And that's actually how I found BCI, because Dr. Jordan Fields came and I was like, okay, I need to do something. And so I would like see Miss Cynthia just walking on campus and I'd be like, I don't know if you remember me, but, and I would just walk up to her and let her know, like, hey, I need to talk. And I went to Dr. Jordan Fields' office and I had started crying. And I told her, I was like, I want to go home. Like, this is not for me. I don't want to be here. I can't, like, I just can't do this program. And I remember she sat me down. She was like, do you want a job? And I was like, that had nothing to do with what I said, though. she was like, no, just hear me out. And so she described BCI, and I was like, oh, that's everything that I did at Wayne State. And I graduated from undergrad at Wayne State University, and it's in the heart of Detroit. And although it is a PWI, Detroit is one of the Blackest cities in America. And the community that I had there was totally different. And so when I got here and I came to BCI, I started figuring out my community and finding a community outside of DU. That's when I started to grow. That's when I got John and Lexis and Dr. Bree, because April sent me to Dr. Bree, and then Dean Tori Wilson. Like, Dean Wilson has been a heaven sent for me. We have been able to talk through every single thing that I'm going through in my program, what I'm experiencing at my field placements with all of the racism and having to educate them, and even to the extent of being told that like my bones are bigger, like genuinely, like that's still that belief of what Black people experience and what we're trying to fight against. And so for me, like, I decided at that point for GSPP, I'm going to have to do more because I'm not seeing what I need. So I'm going to have to create that space. And so the fact that like alumni, Black alumni in our classes, we don't even get to, the only time that I saw people who look like me in my classes when they were telling trauma stories. It wasn't people in the field. I would have loved to talk to someone who looks like me in my field and have that conversation, ask them, how did you get to where you're at? Can I be mentored by you? Can I have this conversation with you? So for me, I'm doing that with my Black students coming into GSPP. We call them like our first years. Well, they're now my second years, but you know, creating that alumni list and that Black community network. And so talking with other GSPP students, and we're going to get an alumni list together for them. We have a resource list. We're going to be able to talk. We're going to let them know what field placements we did, which places we were not supported at, where they can find that support, where they can go, the fact that they can still talk to us. If you're thinking about moving to a different state, here's someone from the program that you can speak to, and they can have that conversation with you. Here's someone that came from the state that you came from. Having those conversations and being honest. I mean, anytime I see a Black incoming student for GSPP, the first thing I do is reach out to them. And I let them know, hey, this was my experience. I'm not saying this is going to be yours, but I want to let you know this is what I experienced, because no one did that for me. No one came to me and had that conversation. And then when I did say something about it, then it was like, oh, what did you expect? I would have known had you talked to me. I would have had that time to have that conversation. And so honestly, for me, like BCI, I don't know. Oh, okay. BCI, like the amount of times John has just let me come into his office and just sit there and just cry, or sit there and let him know I am missing home, or I'm not getting this in my coursework, I'm not getting this in my learning. The amount of times that Thomas Walker allowed me to do that. I mean, he allowed me to write an article about BIPOC representation within the classroom after April left, because that was the only way that I got to talk about it. So I used that article and I was able to say, this is what I'm missing out on. This is what we're not getting. That is where I got that from. And so for me, like, it's just being that other voice for students and having that conversation, especially with being a recent graduate, because now I know what I wanted, but I know what I need, and I know what I'm going to get for my next program when I'm looking at a counseling PhD or a clinical PsyD. and I know what I'm going to accept within my learning. Because that was the biggest thing for me out of these 2 years was what am I going to accept in my learning and what am I not willing to accept. And so I was that Black girl in class. Like I was the one that said everything that came to mind. I was the one that said, this is what you promised, this is what you didn't deliver on. This is what we need to talk about. And if we're going to be working with this population, specifically a population that mostly looks like me and mostly looks like my brothers, then this is what we need to talk about, because there is no dealing with forensic psych without dealing with people who look like me.
Time is moving, so I am going to prompt if for the folks, I know it's 1 o'clock, but also if there are any audience questions that you want to ask our panelists. Just give it a minute, let it sit. Okay, cool. So I also want to say that stories like yours don't exist in silos. And I, through my job, but also through the ways that I show up, and each one of us are containers of Black trauma. And that's also something that we deal with. We're also conjurers of Black joy in what that looks like. So I'll go with the last question. So in what ways can you share your personal experiences and insights that not only educate and enlighten us, but also inspire us and motivate us to take concrete actions? So each one of you are in your various roles across the university. And as you're thinking about the things, your experiences and what you wish that you had, or what we wish we had better support systems of, what does that mean and look like?
So I've been fortunate enough to create some of the things that I wanted to see. So with the Sister Network, that was important because my first 2 days on campus, I heard that we had so many Black women who were graduate students who were leaving the university. And within like the second day that I was there, I was introduced to Dr. Nicole Joseph, and she's like, I have this idea. And so we got together, and actually Dr. Tuitt was the one who connected us. So I think that in the absence of having what I've needed in life, and I think at school, I've been able to create it. And I think that I've been fortunate enough that I've had people who have been really dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion before that was like the title. So I was just sharing actually with a friend of mine last night that I was first generation in that my parents did go to college, but they went to college a non-traditional way. My dad's military. The military filled out his application and was like, show up to that room. So when I was asking about that, he's like, I don't know, who's going to fill that out for you? Let me know. And for my mom, she is from Barbados, and she traveled on a steamliner across to England because there was a 3-year waiting list for nursing school. And so she did nursing school in London. And so when it came my turn, I knew I was going to go to school, but I didn't really know how. And I was really blessed with some amazing people who served as guides for me. So I transferred from a Pikes Peak Community College to University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, and then finally to Boulder. And when I was at Boulder and I became a resident advisor, I had this amazing person. Her name was Valerie Gibson, and she was the one who I tell people, I feel like she helped me to become an adult. And she identified as white, but she really helped me to step into my own voice. So there were times where I was like, Valerie, she's like, no, you say it yourself. You're a strong Black woman. And I'm like, okay. And I think that there were also other people in my life who really role modeled and embraced and tried to find the good that sometimes was overshadowed. So there was another woman who was Valerie's supervisor, Patsy. And when I was in school, there were Black fraternities and sororities, but there weren't houses. And so there weren't places to have parties except for the University Memorial Center. And the University Memorial Center was concerned that there might be fights that could break out. And so Patsy was the area coordinator for Williams Village. And she was like, let's do them over here. And everybody, because pretty much when I started, it was predominantly white. The whole team I was on as a hall director, and then it became more diverse. And she was like, look, there has never been a fight that broke out. They just are concerned that there might be. Why don't we support our students in doing good work? They're doing these non-alcoholic, super fun parties. She's like, why don't we just do them over at Williams Village? So I started seeing those things and was supported in a way that I felt like, oh, I can speak out. And so, you know, when you think about those personal experiences, that's why I do what I do. Oftentimes in my life, I've been the only one. And so the other thing that I talk about that I think is important, we got to bring it back, is saying hello as a Black person to another Black person. When I grew up and in the military and in school, you did not walk past another Black person, like tie your shoe or look in your purse. You were like, hey, how are you? Or you did this. And that was acknowledgement, but that was important because then you knew you were part of the community. So I think we need to bring things like that back, of like looking people in the eye, acknowledging them. If you're a Black person, say hi. I ran out of all my business cards my first year, and the administrative assistant's like, you should probably let those last a little longer. I'm like, that's what you're supposed to do, is hand them out. So whoever I saw, especially students who were Black on a predominantly white campus. And oh, by the way, I should say my mother also handed my business cards out. So I got calls from people all over because my mom was like, you're really good at helping people. So I think that that's the piece that I would close with, is just when you think about those experiences, how do you help others? How do you welcome others? I mean, each one of us has the opportunity to make this environment a welcoming environment for everybody, you know? And so I think we should each be thinking about that, because 10,000 people might seem like a lot on our campus, but it's really not. And how many times do we see each other on a regular basis? It should be on a, hey girl, how are you kind of thing. So that's what I want to share, is just that. And also I want to say we need to also make sure that we are connecting to the Black community. And so even by going to Juneteenth things and by going to different talks and conversations, this is where we start to understand the community that we're in. That we're not, I mean, I think that's how you dispel the myth of the ivory tower, is like, how do we continue to connect with the community?
So I'm looking at time. We got, no, we're good. We're good. So 90-second response to this question.
I can go really quick. In terms of personal experience, one of the things that was beneficial to me at Wayne State University was our Welcome Black. And so for me, that was something that I brought to DU, and that's my partner over there. And that was something that I brought to DU because I wanted to make sure that I was able to see other people. And I swear, like, Welcome Black was the time that I saw myself the most out here, because outside of seeing like athletes and everything, I didn't really see Black students, and a few people in my cohort, I didn't see Black students. That was the time that I got to see Black faculty, Black staff, Black community members, just Black people. And so for me, doing things like that, and also keeping in mind something that Dr. Alexander shared with me, was just, I went to her and I said, I don't want to be the angry Black girl. And she was like, so what? She was like, you have so much to be angry about. Take that, use that. That was the first time that was ever turned into a positive for me. And so I've been using that and telling my first years and my second years that, and keeping that in mind and making sure that I'm staying connected to this community, because I want other Black students to know me and know that they have like some sort of safety within me.
So what do you do? For me, it means you are acknowledging our Black students when you see them, because I know I've heard so many say, I'm just not seen. I'm not seen. So acknowledge, speak, introduce, but then also make the connection, because I think you've heard us say, I didn't see Black people the community of Black people, but that's important for us and our students. So acknowledge, speak, and then make connections, like bring them to the cultural center, to student inclusion and belonging, bring them to eSTEM. So those are the things I'd say.
This is a difficult question for me. And it's difficult because I have had to learn over the course of the last over 2 decades. So see, I have been in historically white educational institutions since the 9th grade. Okay. So you talk about like understanding racism and whiteness on a very intimate level. And it changed when I went to college because then I didn't have a chance to go home to Black people. So I was born and raised in Harlem in New York City, pre-gentrification. Okay. And so in high school, I got to go home to Black folk every day. I got to college and grad school and working and all that. And in working in cities and towns that were predominantly white, where that was not the case anymore. But it's, you said 90 seconds, honey.
We good. 30 more seconds.
I have persisted in these spaces for this long because I refuse to be pushed out. And this is something my mother told me when I was in undergrad and I wanted to transfer. Because I couldn't do it no more. And my mother said, you will not let these people push you out. And so I survived and persisted and graduated from undergrad and made it through grad school and made it through an academic faculty career, making it through an academic faculty career, being bullheaded and stubborn, and being able to be bullheaded and stubborn because I was making connections to Black folk in these spaces. And so it's really a reiteration of what has already been said, but what I will add, I'm going back to the intersectionality thing that I brought up before, the heterogeneity of Black communities. And so when we're talking about wanting to engage in, beyond the borders of DU, right, with Blackness, absolutely. And that can't just be with cis-het Black folk, right? How are we connecting? How are cis-het Black folks showing up at Denver Black Pride events? How are we engaging in Black, queer, and trans communities here in Denver? Because there is one, and it is actually more vibrant than you might expect, it being Denver, okay, and not New York, and not San Francisco, you know what I'm saying? And so we have to make, and I'm talking to us, because I do not rely on institutions for my survival and my safety. I just don't, all right? Institutions don't love us. They never will. And so when we make these strides within institutions, it's because we've done it because we're bullheaded and stubborn, right? And so how can we pull each other in together?
One more thing.
I just have a small little thing too, in addition to what everyone has said too. One of the biggest things that you can do is, for one, staying for these events, being here completely, taking in the information, and also sharing it, because a lot of, like, we came up here, we told our stories, we said these things, but it's also like, listen to us, hear us, feel us, and then take it back and see what you can do for whatever department you work in, students you work with, all of those things, but making sure to stay and actually hear all of those things completely.
Thank you. So let's really just honor our panelists. Thank you. So I'll actually answer that last question as well before I go into my remarks. Colorado is hard for Blackness. Denver is hard for Blackness. DU is hard for Blackness. Let's not pretend that it's not. our collective liberation is on the other side of pretending. So for the folks that know me, know that I like to end these events with proverbs. I'm gonna end with 3. I pointed to you the moon and the stars, and yet you only saw the tip of my finger. One more time. I pointed to you the moon and the stars, and yet you only saw the tip of my finger. It is not taboo to go back and fetch that which you have forgotten. Sankofa. One more time. It is not taboo to go back and fetch that which you have forgotten. And last one is Siwa Bona, which means I hear you, I see you, you matter to me. So I will end it with those words. I hear you, I see you, you matter to me. Thank you for staying for the panel. We do have our food. That's probably my laptop. We do have the food in the background. Feel free. We have the space. Feel free to take it to go. Feel free to mix and mingle. But I want to give one more round of applause to all of the folks. Shout out to the DEI BCI team. Raise your hand. Clara, Lexus, Dr. Witt. And then shout out to Bonnie. Shout out to our video services folks in the back. All right, so protect your magic.